As the sides of their respective arguments making the negative claim, both atheists and libertarians are inundated with religious people and statists barking on about how they're wrong. Of course, we find these statements unconvincing. Our standard of evidence is actually reasonable, and therefore the claims of statists and the religious don't meet it. But as a result of that, we get these same statists and theists saying that we're just so stubbornly incapable of admitting that we're wrong. Of course, if that were the case, very few of us will be atheists or libertarians to begin with. Growing up in a society where we're inundated with religion and statism, that's pretty much the default. And most people who become atheists or libertarians are the ones who break from that. It's far more likely that an atheist grew up a Christian and a libertarian grew up a statist on the right or the left. Still, the question of what if we're wrong is a perfectly valid question, and it's time we answered it.
What if you're wrong about God?
First of all, there would need to be convincing evidence for the existence of God. So let's say that there were. What would that mean?
That would mean the Bible is true.
Really? Why the Bible and not the Quran, the Book of Mormon, the Bhagavad Gita, the Kojiki, the Egyptian Book of the Dead? You see, proving that God exists does not automatically make claims about God true. Let's have our erstwhile opposition take a different position for the time being.
Mermaids are real.
Well, there certainly are a lot of stories about mermaids, and they happen in cultures spanning the globe. Of course, there's Hans Christian Andersen's famous story, The Little Mermaid. There's the story of the goddess Atargatis, from 1000 BC. Legend has it that Alexander the Great's sister, Thessaloniki, was turned into a mermaid. There's the Babylonian god Enki, Julinar from the 1001 Arabian Nights, the Ben-Veri from the Isle of Man. They're in legends from China and Africa. The people of Guam still tell the story of Starina, the first mermaid. The Caribbeans, La Sirene. Blackbeard himself reported seeing them, as did many others. And yet, there isn't the first piece of evidence that they actually exist, aside from a few badly done hoaxes.
But you don't know. Mermaids could be out there. There could be evidence for them someday.
Maybe. Suppose that happened right now. What would that mean? We know that the information we have about mermaids up to this point is just made-up stories and fabrications. Could we trust any of them to be correct?
Well, some of them might be.
But how would we know? We'd have to study the mermaids independently and see. And if any of them were right, they would have been right only by luck. It would not confirm that any of them had any actual knowledge of mermaids, and we wouldn't be able to use any of them to make predictions about what real mermaids are like.
Okay, can I stop believing in mermaids now? I'm feeling a little silly.
Oh, and you didn't in the first 10 parts?
Ha ha ha.
Not to mention those big silly glasses.
Hey, you promised not to make fun of my glasses.
Oh, right, yeah. Sorry. Anyway, the point is, if we did find evidence for God, it wouldn't automatically make the Bible or any of the other books about him right. The universe would still be much older than 6,000 years, humans still wouldn't come from just 2 specimens, and there still wouldn't have been a global flood. We still would have evolved from a common ancestral population, the universe would still have formed in the Big Bang, and so on. Simply finding God would not overturn any of that. The evidence is still the evidence. And yet, just like with the mermaid stories, we wouldn't be able to use any of those religious texts to make predictions about what God is like. But more than that, all of these followers of all of these religions would just use the discovery as an excuse to shore up their defenses.
See, we were right and you atheists were wrong.
Yes, in that case, we would have been wrong as a question of fact. But since the religious people would all be using this as confirmation for everything they believe, they wouldn't be in any position to know what God is really like. In that case, it's actually the atheists, or rather the now former atheists, who would be in a much better position to study him. There wouldn't be any preconceived notions or biases to overcome. Once we accepted the existence of God, we'd be able to study his true nature, and would still have to fight the religious people tooth and nail. So there is every possibility that we are wrong, but even if that were the case, that still wouldn't make religion right. And even if it could, there's still the question of which religion. Not only that, but even if you could prove Christianity right in one aspect, that doesn't automatically make it right about everything else. Maybe Christianity is right about one thing, Islam is right about another, and Buddhism is right about a third. You don't get to do this all or nothing proposal. There's just no defense for it. As for libertarianism, what would it mean for a libertarian to be wrong?
Hey, look! I found one thing the state can do that no one else can.
What would that mean? Well, it means that we found a problem, the only solution to which is to give a monopoly group the power to initiate force. So?
That means we're right.
Actually, no, it doesn't. Okay, you found one problem we need a state to solve. But just like with religion, it doesn't automatically make you right about the rest. The evidence is still the evidence. Minimum wage would still result in unemployment instead of the poor getting an instant raise. It would still be wrong for the NSA to spy on us. And prohibition still wouldn't work and would only create a violent criminal black market. None of that would have changed. And yet, when we tear apart something the state does, you still come back with,
"But who would build the roads?"
Even if you were able to prove that only the state can make roads, that still wouldn't mean that minimum wage is good, or only the state can fight fires, or they can just pass a law and get us all off drugs. And besides, how would you prove this? As long as the state is the default, as long as you get to just unilaterally declare legitimate intrusions into this area, you've proved nothing, because you haven't given anyone else the chance to try anything else. And remember, that's all libertarians want. Give us the option to try other solutions. And if it is true that only the state can do this or that, then no one else will even be able to offer another alternative. So why all this monopolization? What are you afraid of? No, even if you could prove we can only build roads by force, that doesn't mean that other policies and programs must be implemented by force. And it certainly wouldn't mean that the same group of people had to do it. See, just like with religion, you don't get to do an all or nothing proposal. Even if it's true that we need to use force to build the roads and fight fires, that doesn't mean that the same entity, your state, must do both. Why can't one group of people build roads and a completely different group of people fight fires? So even if you can prove us wrong, you've still got a long way to go towards justifying your state. We're perfectly willing to be shown wrong. But remember that not only is the burden of proof on you, but that simply countering that one proposal is not enough to confirm all of your claims. Now it's your turn. What if you're wrong?